All right, welcome everyone. This is State Building Code Council IBC Technical Advisory Group for January 15th, 2026. Could we please take roll?
Todd Byrather,
Here.
Roger Haringa, not seeing online. Joe Mayo,
Here.
thank you. Che Fortaleza, not seeing online. Tim Woodard,
Here.
thank you. Steve Belzak, not online. Lance Dahl, not seeing online. Hoyt Jeter,
Yeah, I'm here. Hopefully you can hear me.
I can hear you, thank you. Sean Carlstrom,
Here.
thank you. Todd Sullivan, not online. Bill Mybush, not online. Brian Horstman, not online. Joshua Mergens,
Present.
thank you. Trent Tinney, not seeing online. Michael Shaw, not online. Brett Conway, not seeing online. Michael Barth,
I'm here.
thank you. Leah Summer, not seeing online. Paul Clark,
Here.
thank you. Andy Leonto, not seeing online. And so we're shy of quorum right now. We've got 7 seats represented. I'll continue to monitor, see if we establish here today.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll give the opportunity, anyone from the public like to be recognized? Oh, go ahead, Patrick. You're muted, but
You know, he's not muted. We're not hearing him though.
Let me try this one.
Oh, gotcha.
That works. This is Patrick Hanks with the Building Industry Association of Washington. Thank you.
thank you. Okay, seeing no one else without quorum, we will move then straight into discussion. Now, should we can we discuss the childcare without quorum, or do you want to just
I mean, we can, but at our last meeting, the discussion was to table it in light of trying to get stuff finalized with the dwelling units and temporary emergency shelters. So I'll leave it up to the will of the group to discuss.
Okay, so we keep tabling it because we're not making not that
Correct.
we're not making progress, it's just that we have no new information, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So unless anyone would objects, then we can move right into dwelling units. Anyone want to talk about child care centers with new information? Okay, hearing none. Let's begin a discussion with dwelling units, and if we get quorum, then we can if we need to take action. Okay, Dustin, do you want to kind of lead us a little bit on any updates to this?
Yes. So let me get into my folders here. So at the last time we discussed or we had dwelling unit size on our agenda, we also didn't get quorum for the group. So we had some discussion. We reviewed. Let me get to my notes here. I mean, we kind of just had discussion that flowed in relation to our topic summary. I think that I added a couple lines to that one. But we really is really talking about where the efficiencies can be had in the design of these units. Since then, I do have a proposal submitted to me by Micah Chappelle, who has been in attendance to these meetings. And we can start with a look at that and hear from him, or we can kind of open up our topic summary and kind of refresh our memories on that, or what is the will of the group as far as it. And I see some more people dropping in, and I haven't had a chance to review that against our attendance list.
Okay. Well, as you do that, so remember, we're trying to get to the finish line here. So we're going to look at language, and that's where we did ask her, Micah engaged. And if anyone wants to give a summary, Tim, I see you pop on there. If you also were involved in that language, is Micah on?
I don't see him
I
on.
do. He's on here.
No.
Okay, but Tim, you can speak for Micah. No, go ahead.
No.
Tim or Micah?
I would love Micah to present that though. And then we also
Okay.
have the other proposal by I can't remember the name. But it was
David.
from the National Healthy Living.
Right.
So maybe then we could compare those two and come to a resolution.
Okay. Micah, you okay with that?
I am. I do believe that our previous meeting on dwelling units, though, we covered quite a bit of what I threw out there, and I think it was going to come back to the tag for looking at possibly combining what I threw out there, what David threw out there, or others, as some possible solutions. I think that someone also mentioned the CDU rule from Seattle.
Yep.
Mr. Neiman's proposal, I think it was David. You can correct me if I'm wrong, David. I think it was your proposal. And then what I threw out there at the last meeting, I think we did go over that pretty thoroughly. We did kind of get sidetracked on the 30-inch minimum in front of the appliances. I don't know, Dustin, if you want to pull the proposals up.
Yeah.
But I think we did get through the rest of it. They kind of got rid of efficiency dwelling units, because if we go with the rest of the item I threw out there, we're only looking at 120 square foot space and nothing else. One habitable room, and the rest of them are not having to meet that requirement and meet that 7-foot requirement. So I think I went through it. If you want to pull them up, Dustin, and you can go through this one first, and then we can go through Mr. Neiman's or the CDU rule. I'll just talk really fast. 1208.1. This was from the CDU rule because folks liked the CDU rule somewhat, so I just brought it over that in front of appliances or through your kitchen, you could have that 30-inch clearance. Wouldn't have to meet the 3-foot clearance. And then if you want to scroll down, Dustin, again, that was just from the CDU rule that folks, you can take it or leave it. And then in this one, it is a little different than Mr. Neiman's proposal, where it was 70 square feet. This just said shall have one room not less than 120 square feet. So there's no minimum of the 190 any longer. I think that was also part of Mr. Neiman's proposal, was to eliminate that overall minimum. And then this also kept the sleeping units and other habitable rooms of a dwelling unit keep having the 70 square feet. Again, that could go away, and just at least the other habitable rooms, and just keep it as a sleeping unit would need to have the 70 square feet. And then again, I thought if we're only looking at really one space, there's no need for an efficiency dwelling unit, because as defined, the efficiency dwelling unit is all those things in one space anyway. That's a quick and fast for that, and thanks. Let me know if you have questions.
That's a good summary. Get us back up to speed.
And so just for everybody to know, I don't have the David Neiman proposal uploaded for this meeting. I'm prepared to show it on screen. I can drop it on the webpage here while we're discussing stuff as well. But if you wanted to find it online before I'm able to drop it in there, it's in the October 30th, 2025 meeting. It's the last time it was posted.
Okay. Thank you for that. Go ahead, Tim.
Just wanted to throw it out there, especially since we're getting rid of the efficiency dwelling units. Should we clarify on the room area portion where we've marked it to 120 for one room and sleeping unit 70 square feet? Should we clarify that those can't be the same room? Like, is there any reason why we need to say that out loud? I think we all know that here on the call, but does it create any confusion that you have to have a separate sleeping room that's 70 square feet?
You're saying someone might interpret this as you have to have a sleeping room
Yeah.
unit. Okay. Well, I could see that. I mean, obviously the simplest.
Sorry, I'm going to raise
Mr.
my
Chair,
hand on that.
We
Yeah.
do have a quorum now too, just FYI.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not indicating that you would have a separate sleeping room, Tim. And I'm sorry, these aren't italicized. That's sleeping unit. There's a difference between a dwelling unit and a sleeping unit. So the sleeping unit would be the 70 square feet. It's because you're not necessarily going to have a full kitchen in a sleeping unit. You'll have access to a full kitchen or a full restroom, full bathroom in a sleeping unit, but it's not a sleeping room. Was the intent there is to maintain that sleeping unit identifier per the current code.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
this
think-
is Hoyt. Now I want to add on that the same with I don't think we should take that out. I think we should keep that 70 because that's the actual um, the habitable room space that you need as a minimum size in code. So I'm the same way. I know typically they're probably always going to hit that, but I think it's important that you have a minimum size sleeping room specified.
So, Hoyt, if I may jump in, and I had asked this before, I still, what's the justification for the 120 then? If we were to say 70 feet, is there another scenario where we say 70 feet plus these other dimensional requirements and we get there? Or does that
Well,
just cause a lot of
the
heartburn
way
with people on
I
120?
the nice thing, this is where I'm not 100% positive, right? But what I think is nice about it is that you actually have a minimum net floor area. Okay. So it's actually talking the net floor of 120 square feet. Uh, In my opinion, right now, this is just my opinion. I think in maybe the next cycle, that may be something to kind of see when people are actually starting to do these things. I just, I just, it's just a comfort level. Just like it. That's all. That's the only thing. I mean, you probably could take it out. I think it's easier in the future to take it out than to put it back in later on. So that's my theory behind it. So,
And that's what I'm asking, like who gets
yeah.
uncomfortable, who has heartburn and why? And it's honest to say, it just doesn't feel right below that. But I think, if we can get a little something a little more defensible. But I think more my question is are we already covered with some of these other dimensional requirements? We talked for, 30 minutes last time about 30 inches versus 36. And, you know, are we putting unnecessary constraints on that we might already have achieved probably 120 square feet? But go ahead, Micah.
I'm gonna throw out there to maintain the 120 would be I know that what it talked about was going down to a 70 square foot dimension. But I believe this is kind of a good balance of not going that far down in size, but also going down from the 190 for an entire dwelling unit. So I do want to suggest, Dustin, if you don't mind sharing on screen where we strike and other habitable rooms of a dwelling unit, strike that language because again, what I was looking to do was align with the proposal that was approved. Keep going. Oh, sorry. Yes, other habitable rooms of a dwelling unit. You're right. That just ignore me. Trying to align that 120 with the residential code change proposal that was put forth and approved for the IRC that said we're going to look at a 120 square foot room and we're not going to look at other rooms in a dwelling unit. Previously, it was you would look at the 120, or sorry, you'd look at 70. Any habitable room had to be the 70 square foot size. So for the residential, we're not doing that anymore. So we thought that would be a good thing to align here in this section too, is look at the 120 square foot room and then don't look at other stuff. Kind of how it goes. And then again, the sleeping unit is defined as something different than a dwelling unit. So that's why we would want to maintain that at 70 square feet and not increase it or decrease it. If you increased or decreased the entire dwelling unit down to the same size as a sleeping unit, the only difference is whether or not you got a kitchen. And I think if we look at our list of issues to discuss in this tag, what makes a kitchen or a cooking facility as part of the definition of dwelling unit? And we had a lot of variables in there from different jurisdictions. I'll stop talking, a lot of hands up.
Yeah, you lit it up. So thank you. Josh.
Yeah. So sorry if some of this has been discussed because I've had a few things get in the way of participating as much in the last couple of meetings. But just to make sure I'm understanding, then we're proposing having no limit on bedroom sizes or any other habitable room within a dwelling unit, not a sleeping unit. So just being a little facetious, they could make a broom closet a bedroom in a dwelling unit, provided their living room's 120 square feet. Is that what we're doing, and that's what's mirrored in the residential code? That seems a little odd to me that there's no requirement for a bedroom to have a minimum size, And maybe that's where we're heading. That's fine. I'm just trying to make sure I understand from the group that that's what we're doing.
Who'd like to respond?
I'll respond if you want. I think I was gonna say maybe Mr. Demon wants to respond, but my understanding is yes, that's the direction we'd like to go, more market driven. And David, I'd be happy to hear your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I don't sense that either one of us was proposing that we make a minimum room size less than 70 square feet. With just a this question of whether or not it's 70 is the appropriate number or 120. If I can editorialize for a minute, Micah, I think you're justifying the 120 based upon the sort of history of the Seattle CDU rule and the existence of some rule changes that were just made to the SRC. I'm justifying 70 based on, because that's what the National Healthy Housing Standard says, and that's what the legislation says to consider. So I mean, that's
sure.
Aside from that, I don't think there's that much, difference between how you and I are thinking about it.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think one of the things I'm looking at here is the National Healthy Housing Standard identifies their 70 square feet is for habitable rooms. And I'm indicating that the 120 is for the entire dwelling unit, which may include other spaces besides habitable rooms.
Oh, well, that's okay. There you go. So
Okay.
actually,
yeah,
that is.
I think we're more on the same page, but you're still going to get one room that's at least 120, some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Well, I guess the room. The way that the code is written, 120 would not be inclusive of the bathroom and the closets and the kitchen counters and so forth. It would just be the floor space that's in the studio part of the studio. True? Okay. Yeah. And that's so essentially 120 would be either 120 square foot usable area, or it would be the little neck where you come into the building, 20, 30, 40 square feet of not really habitable space plus whatever's left over. I think is that what you're saying, or would you saying that the little neck of space where you come into the building would not count towards that 120?
I think any of your habitable spaces will still have to meet the 7-foot dimension per 1208.1 above.
Yeah,
so
gotcha. So So I think you and I are both assuming that there's some kind of a test for the space that says, that doesn't really, yes, that's room area, but it doesn't count towards your minimum. And so, that's, and the result of it, I think, more or less, is that if you the rules that you're proposing would result in things like what you see in Seattle, where the practical size of a unit is about 250 square feet. And the result of what I'm proposing is that they would be a little less than 200 square feet.
Okay, I think I'm understanding.
Okay.
I like the dialogue back and forth with it. It's helpful.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, well, we'll go back then. We'll come in a circle. Michael?
I very strongly support what Micah originally proposed in all of this. My suggestion would be to keep that and other habitable rooms language in there, because I think it does identify that other rooms, if they're provided, do need to at least be the 70 square feet. So I'm in support of the language as Micah has originally proposed.
What's the counter argument to that?
Well, I'm giving a counter argument. The important thing is the sleeping unit you want to have, the 70 square feet, where they're actually sleeping, because when you get up in an emergency or you get up in something like that from a smoke alarm and stuff, you have enough space to get around. An actual habitable space is not a sleeping room. It could be used for totally something else. So I'm actually fine striking out the other habitable rooms of the dwelling units and just keep sleeping rooms shall be the net floor area of 70 square feet, and then leave it up to the architect how they get the rest of the 120 to be, because a habitable room, from my perspective of doing the code reviews, I get misinterpretation of what is a habitable room, and especially in so I guess I'm on the opposite side on that. So.
Okay. Thank you for that. Tim, can you decide, please?
No. But I was gonna say I'd like to see Dave's proposal too,
Okay.
so we could look at the two differences and kind of help us kind of narrow in on that. And then the last comment, and maybe Micah can comment on this later, is now that we are striking the title for 1208.4, the room area, and then you pointed out to me that the sleeping units, and I think Hoyt might have been a little confused there too, is it's not the sleeping rooms, it's the defined term of a sleeping unit. Now we have the requirement for sleeping unit sizes in the title chapter 12083 dwelling unit area. And a sleeping unit isn't a dwelling unit. So I think we might have to keep the two code sections, but I'd like to see Dave's proposal too.
Yeah,
It's a
there
good
may
idea.
need to be some adjustments. Nice catch.
Okay, now as we're doing that, Josh, do you want to make some comments or do you want David to?
Yeah, we're kind of circling towards what I was getting at, and Tim kind of pointed out, but the definition of a sleeping unit specifically does not apply to a dwelling. So we got to be careful with how we're doing this. What we have written right now on the page, there is zero requirement for a sleeping room. And like Hoyt brought up out of concern about, proper egress and being able to maneuver and get out of there. A sleeping unit, as defined in the IBC, is a single unit that provides room or spaces for one or more persons, including permanent provisions for sleeping, and can include provisions for living, eating, or either sanitation or kitchen, but not both. So you can't have a bathroom and a kitchen with a sleeping unit. That makes it not a sleeping unit. And the last and most important sentence, such rooms and spaces that are also part of a dwelling unit are not sleeping units. So a sleeping unit is a separate thing from a dwelling. And I think Micah brought that up and Tim brought that up, but I'm worried that that's being lost on us a little. There's no such thing as a sleeping unit inside a dwelling. There may be bedrooms, but a sleeping unit is not a bedroom. A sleeping unit is a different, distinct thing, more like dormitories. I don't know if that's the exact proper thing. Somebody with more experience in architectural code review can help me fill in on that, but I know for certain that this does not put any requirement on bedroom room size. And if we're okay with that, that's great. But I'm hearing people say different things.
Yeah, well, just real quick, that's why I think we should keep sleeping unit where they're actually sleeping, that you have that minimum. I just don't want to take that out. So,
But Hoyt, sleeping unit, have you looked at the definition in the IBC?
yep.
You can't have a sleeping unit inside a dwelling unit.
Okay, is everyone in agreement on that? That's helpful. And is that reinforced?
It's a sentence I'm reading. I can show you. I don't think we need
Yeah,
to
yeah.
read it right
Yeah,
here.
I agree with that. I put my hand up. I think you could take in where sleeping unit starts, you could separate that out into, say, sleeping unit area size as a separate little subsection under 1208 here. I should have done that when we sent it over, but that's a great catch. Again, we're not creating a sleeping room. We're maintaining the sleeping unit. We just need to change the title for a separate section.
So are you saying that the 1208.3 dwelling unit size is every dwelling unit shall have less than one room that shall have so forth, and then 1208.4, for example, might be sleeping units? Okay. I think that's what you're saying, Tim, right?
Yeah.
Everyone seems in agreement on that? If this is the path we go down?
I think that it should be sleeping rooms instead of sleeping units in that situation, because a sleeping room is what we're talking about within a dwelling unit, as opposed to a sleeping unit, which is a defined term.
Yeah, but
Okay, I got some
sleeping
head
unit
shaking.
needs to have a specific size, and that is base code language in this section. I didn't add sleeping unit. That's existing language in 1208. So you would need to maintain that somewhere, even if you do decide as a tag to have a sleeping room with a minimum size in this section, you still need to maintain some identifier for the sleeping unit and the minimum size of the sleeping unit.
Good point.
Yeah, I want to add on that too. No, I don't want to have sleeping room, sleeping unit, exactly what Micah said. It's a defined term and it tells you that. And I think we need to keep a sleeping unit, not a sleeping room. So.
Okay, if we go down this path, it sounds like there's not a lot of debate about that and 70 square feet and just get it out of there. Let's talk about dwelling units then. Okay. Okay, I'm starting to understand this. David, now, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on, I'm hoping this is helping to clarify, not derail, but sleeping unit versus dwelling unit. We've designed a lot of these, probably 1,000 units of each kind in Seattle over the past 10 years, and in dozens of projects. And a typical sleeping unit has a 70 square foot living area, has a bathroom, has a kitchenette, has a closet. A dwelling unit, right, has all those things, plus it has a cooktop. That's the only difference. But the sleeping unit can have a 70 square foot living room, and the dwelling unit needs to have the 190 square foot if it's a studio, 120 if it's a CDU. And this is sort of the arbitrary nature of these requirements that I want to point out. It's the same human. It's the same human seeking affordable rent. And when I put a cooktop into the unit, all of a sudden, boom, the habitable space requirements grow significantly. It doesn't make any sense. You can't justify it empirically, and it's not supported by empirical documents by the National Healthy Housing Standard. And that's kind of where I'm trying to drive the conversation is there's really not a strong empirical case for having a number bigger than 70. And we allow it all the time. And in fact, we just passed a state law to allow sleeping units to be developed throughout the state and to try to encourage and destigmatize them. And I'm trying to encourage you to kind of look at this code with that critical eye and say, is there really a justification for having a bigger number for a studio apartment just because I put a cooking appliance in it?
That's a good question. And you want to take some responses real quick, David, and then come back?
Sure.
Okay, let's go in order. Joshua.
So looking at the definitions, and maybe there's a part of this that I'm missing. I don't see what you just described for a sleeping unit. A sleeping unit doesn't have anything to do with cooktop necessarily. What it says is you can't have both a kitchen and a bathroom. Now, maybe there's a definition somewhere about exactly what a kitchen is. I can't find a definition anywhere for what a kitchen is. So it says if you have kitchen facilities. Kitchen facilities, I would think, is interpreted as any, well, piece of a kitchen or including a kitchenette as a kitchen facility.
Not in the real world.
Okay. Well, shouldn't we fix that then? I mean, if we're saying the real world is operating in something separate from what the language is in the code, if there's no language in the code that supports it, and we're here writing code language.
I don't think the goal is to defunctionalize sleeping units. I think the goal is just try to come up with a logical minimum square footage for.
Well, I think the
housing.
goal is to come up with a logical square footage and put that into a set of language that is coherent. What you're describing is that the real world is not coherent, but we've all accepted that we're going to operate that way.
Your words, not mine. I think it's quite coherent that a kitchenette becomes a kitchen when you complete it.
Could you help us understand where that is? Because if that's the case, then that makes a lot of good sense. I might just be missing that definition entirely.
Josh, I think what you need to combine here or look at for definitions is dwelling unit identifies the items that make it a dwelling unit, and that's a permanent cooking facility. Kitchen is not necessarily a defined term, and kitchen facility definitely is not.
Totally get that. Just the one thing I want to circle back to, and I'll just drop after this because I'm not an architect, and I'll happily just shut up and get the hell out of here. But it specifically says you can't have a bathroom and kitchen facilities, and there's no definition for kitchen facilities. That's my only thing. If the rest of the world's just ignoring that language and we all have a colloquial understanding, that's totally fine. Sure. With some of the things I've seen us be persnickety about on code, it's a little shocking to me that we would ignore that, but open to being corrected, and I will put my hand down and just sit quietly.
I think you're giving us good questions and good food for thought. I think David may have oversimplified that, in my opinion, a little bit for what's the difference. What the difference to me for the dwelling unit, sleeping unit, is the dwelling unit will not have common space, whether that's a common sanitation facility or a common kitchen facility, where a dwelling unit does not have that, and a sleeping unit will. So that was, in my opinion, why you're allowed to have that much smaller square footage of allowable habitable space in a sleeping unit, because you have external common space that a dwelling unit will not have or is not required to have. So again, when we get down and we're going to combine that size, or a dwelling unit is going to be the same size as a sleeping unit, now you're having a much smaller space for the dwelling unit because you don't have a common space that you can go and access like you do in a sleeping unit. So there's an opinion for you. Thanks.
Okay, we're getting there. Tim?
Okay, so comparing these two documents, and I think coming to some resolution is 1208.3 in Dave's document. He's got it marked down to 70, but I think by your own admission, you can't build a actually 70 square foot dwelling unit. It's more about that room size.
It's about the size of the habitable space. Yeah.
Well, it's not even that though, because no, and maybe we need to pull up the definition of habitable space again to make sure we're all on the same page too. 'Cause I might be off here, but
Yeah.
you talked about that neck area being the difference, right?
Yeah.
So if we look at that neck area added to your 70 square feet, that's going to get you to at least, I mean, I'm going to say 6 foot wide with the countertop on it and the passageway for people to walk by 8 feet. That's another 48 square feet. So now you're at what, 118 square feet versus 120. So I kind of like the way the Dave's is structured in the, except for we changed 1208.3 to 120. And then we say every dwelling unit shall have one habitable room that's at least 70 square feet. So then you get to the 70 square feet for the bedroom portion of it. And then you could still call it a separate room for the kitchen portion of it, but that adds to your overall habitable square feet in the room. Does any of that make sense to anybody else besides me?
I can only speak to how it's been interpreted in Seattle because all my work's been there. But in Seattle, all of that, both of the think of it as like the square area where the living room is and the little rectangle where the neck is, and together it makes a panhandle. That the panhandle is considered part of the space. It's all one continuous space, but it's discounted from counting towards the total number. So I might have within that whole panhandle, I might have 120 square feet, and 50 of it might be considered too small to count, and so the net is 70. And so I mean, I think the concept you're talking about is right. It's not how these words that we're looking at right here that I've just amended the numbers for have been interpreted in my experience in Seattle, which is where these projects get built.
Just to throw it out there though, because you modified 1208.4 where that used to be 120, if you look at that efficiency dwelling unit, the whatever it's called from Seattle, their directive, it shows that 120 in that box area. So they were getting to 190, which used to be the old requirement, by adding in that neck area. So now
in their CDUs, yeah.
Right. So if we take the overall amount down to 120, we could now look at the box area at least 70 square feet. And then we would have the neck area contributing to get us to that 120 total. And that wouldn't include the bathroom. So you're still even going to be a little bigger for your overall footprint area.
Yeah,
and I
Tim,
just want to make sure that we're all on the
rule
same
is getting
page.
to 150. I know where you're going with that, but our CD rule is getting to 150, not to 190.
Okay.
And the floor plate with the bathroom, I think, like you said, was a little larger. I think David also mentioned that was about 200, 220.
And in Seattle, if it was an efficiency unit, not a CDU, it would be 190 plus the neck.
Oh,
that's how it's always been interpreted.
Yeah. And the other thing, Tim, that is not necessarily being addressed if we do go smaller, that the CDU rule tries to address is what do we count encroaching into that space? What's clear space? What, if you put a built-in in there, does that count? Does that take away from your 120 or other space? So there were some specifications in there that would not be within this section of the code for Washington.
We're getting twisted around in all these definitions, aren't we?
Easy subject.
Tim, did you want to go? Did you have your hand up still?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, let's go, Josh.
Just wanted to put out one comment as we're considering this and considering interpretations in Seattle that we are not amending the Seattle building code. We're amending the Washington State code that applies literally everywhere except Seattle. So let's just keep in mind, if we're looking too closely at Seattle, we may also need to consider all the other amendments that have happened in the Seattle building code, as it's quite different from the regular IBC. So I just want to be careful in saying this is how Seattle has interpreted it. because Seattle is not using this code that we're amending.
I feel like we need a whiteboard here. Hoyt. Go ahead.
So yeah, okay, yeah. I just got a question real quick, just something minor that gets in here, but that is put in the other stuff, and I get involved with this when there's net and gross, right? I wonder if we want to make sure we're clear that we're talking net or gross, similar to like on the left-hand side where they talk about net floor area and things like that. When I'm looking at, is it David Neiman? I apologize if I pronounced that wrong.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, okay. So I want to make sure that's clear in the code that we don't get rid of that because, to me, when you get these small efficiency units, it's a net area that you're really worried about, not the gross area. In some of these items, and it looks like when I look at them on the one on David Neiman, he's getting rid of that net, and that's one I would definitely, if we go with that one, I'm just saying it needs to be net, not gross.
Yeah, I'm not proposing to get rid of net.
Okay. Joe.
I just wonder if we'd be served by creating a few diagrams about this that, oftentimes a code commentary or other, clarifications. We'll just have a couple of diagrams just so we're all more clear about the terms we're using and what they apply to. And maybe that could get actually inserted into this code section to make sure that there aren't multiple interpretations or someone might easily miss a definition or interpret something differently.
Yeah. So there are diagrams that I think David provided, and there's also the Seattle one that has the diagram that we're discussing. And we looked at those in the past, so maybe Dustin could pull those up too.
Yeah. I agree, Joe. I just think to get through this exercise, we need to revisit those, and that was my whiteboard comment. I think we need to make sure we're all talking about the same thing and then stack hands on that and then make sure we got the language right.
Is David's diagram in this PDF that's pulled up now, or was that a different document?
No. Give me a moment. I can get those diagrams popped open.
Okay. Do we think we're converging though? So we got about 20 minutes left. If I feel like we can get there, don't you? At least
I think we're there. I mean, we just need to vote on 120 or one or 70. And I think mostly that's the only changes we're deciding on.
No, we need to move sleeping units into a different section too.
So what do we use as the base language here? We're going to use the Micah's on the left and add some of David's concerns, or vice versa?
I personally would rather stick with David's structure and then leave the room area section alone, and then it would apply still to sleeping units because it's not retitled at that point.
Okay. Josh, is your hand still up?
Yeah, it is. So kind of circling back to this strikeout that we did at the beginning of the meeting, we are saying with this, and I feel like I'm hearing differences across here. The dwelling unit says we have 120 and we're talking between 120 and 70. I heard, hey, we don't want to penalize sleeping rooms. We're not. We're saying sleeping rooms have to have at least 70 square feet. That's always been there, period. The other habitable rooms and dwelling unit that we cut out is saying that there is no other minimum room size outside of one of them being 120 square feet. And that's what we want to do. We're fine. But I don't know why we're talking about breaking sleeping units out, or how there's an interpretation that we are not allowing sleeping units of 70 feet. It seems as it's written on the left, sleeping units shall have a net floor area of not less than 70 square feet. We are just, all that strikeout does is remove from dwelling units a minimum requirement for other habitable rooms outside of the 120. So I suppose the 7-foot minimum room width would probably help us in the end, but technically as it's written with that strikeout, that's something we're striking out from the code, from the model code, we're saying that you can have a 7-foot by 1 foot habitable space.
And that's one of the reasons I wanted to stick with David's.
Yeah, I don't think we should strike it out. That's basically what I'm getting at. That's why I've been kind of arguing this whole point. I don't think that strikeout quite makes sense. I think we have a lot of different interpretations of exactly how this is meaning, but I don't see it as that convoluted or cut and dry. I think we just all hear sleeping unit, we think sleeping room. A sleeping unit is a separate definition. And what we're doing here is not affecting sleeping units whatsoever by the strikeout. We're affecting dwelling units. And this section is not specifically dwelling in sleeping unit separate. This is room area section, not dwelling unit area size. So I guess unless it's the will of everyone else that we want to not have a requirement for just saying you can have a 7 foot by 12-inch bedroom, so be it. But that's the effect of what we're doing. And I feel like we are discussing things unrelated to that effect.
Okay, Dustin, I know you're multitasking, but when you do get a chance, can you please scroll up on David's back to the language?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're good. Okay, so Josh, coming back to that, if we take Tim's suggestion that we use the base language on the right,
Let's see. So when you say base language, yeah, I mean, and we can do this, dwelling units shall have a minimum 70 square feet for the 1208.3 and 1208.4. Here we go. Every dwelling unit shall have not less than one habitable room, 70 square feet. Yeah, I don't have an issue with this. The only thing I'm taking umbrage with is at the beginning of this meeting, we cross out a section that has an effect that I don't think is what was desired. I'm not trying to make sleeping units bigger. I'm not trying to do anything else. I'm saying we took out a requirement for dwelling units. And from the conversation, it seems like we were trying to benefit sleeping units by doing so. And I don't think that's a regulatory effect of what we've accomplished. Here's a better way. Can somebody tell me why we struck that out? The other habitable rooms of a dwelling unit, or the and other habitable rooms of a dwelling unit in 1208.4. If anyone has a reason why we struck that out, that's awesome.
So Josh, I can tell you the reason that was given from Micah when we started, and his reasoning why he asked Dustin to add that was he was trying to align this with the changes that were done to the IRC. And as you just suggested, the IRC is no longer regulating any room except for one room meeting at least 120 square feet. So theoretically, they could have a 7 foot by 1 foot room in the IRC now. So he was just trying to align those two changes that happened, one in the IRC, and now we're looking at this IBC section. So why not make it the same and let market drive how big bedrooms have to be? I don't like that. So I want to essentially stick with what David's proposal is on the right, where we leave all that intact for 1208.3 and 1208.4. We just make the changes he's suggesting and decide on the 70 square feet and 1208.3. But then I actually like Micah's suggestion that we just get rid of the efficiency dwelling at the bottom. And out of these 12 meetings we've had, we come down to changing like 4 numbers in the code and deleting a section. And I think we're done.
I could not agree with you more, Tim. That was a perfect summary. That's exactly where my head's at. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm just in favor of going with what David has on the right. I would be much more comfortable with market dictating that 70 square foot, but still having rules for bedrooms than having the market dictate bedrooms and have slightly more living room.
Okay, go ahead, David. Thank you, Josh.
Oh, I was just going to point out that 1208.1 is unchanged by all these proposals, and it has a 7 foot minimum dimension in all plan dimensions for habitable space.
Is it all plan dimensions? That's how it's normally interpreted?
Yes. Yeah. Shall be not less than 70 feet in any plan dimension.
7 feet. So 49 square feet is the minimum room size in theory.
Well, that makes me feel much better. I thought, and I don't have in front of me, that it said room width in 1208.1.
Got it.
If it is any plan dimension in both of these, then that's fantastic. We've been using the room width. So no, then that addresses my concerns of having no minimum size on a bedroom. And I could get on board with I mean, really at this point, I'm just going to raise my hand at the end because any of this makes sense. And as someone pointed out, it's almost arbitrary and we just kind of need to try something and let market and time dictate, but we're called by the legislature to lower the size. Should we just, I mean, should we show of hands who wants 70, who wants 120, and then we're done?
I'd like to have more discussion before we do show of hands.
Go ahead, Mike. I thank you, Josh, and we'll
Yeah,
come back.
thanks. I'm not on the tag, so I don't get a vote here. So I can show of hands, it would be irrelevant. I do want to point out some of the issues with going with a dwelling unit that's only 70 square feet and no other requirements. With the 190 and the efficiency dwelling unit language as in the current code, the efficiency dwelling unit was defined as having one room. If we eliminate that, which was part of the discussion, or just going with David's, which is not part of the discussion, you're not required to have a bedroom in a dwelling unit or sleeping room. So that means you could have a dwelling unit inclusive of your kitchen and other spaces that is only 70 square feet. Sleeping, kitchen, all of it can be in that 70 square feet. So I think if you just drive with just that language in 1208.3, you're going to a 70 square foot dwelling unit as a whole. Not just an efficiency dwelling unit, but that could be a bedroom, other things, whatever. It's just 70 square feet. I think you're going to run into some other issues that are unintended consequences with just putting that number out there, because you're not required to have other habitable rooms. That's a concern. So we probably need to evaluate before you just jump to that exact number, because it's not clear. And then with the rest of David's proposal, there's some stuff in here that's not real clear on how you enforce it. What's an enclosed cabinet? What's a utensil storage? Things like that. You're talking an oven and a cooktop and a freezer. Do you regulate those currently? And how would that be enforced? A lot of other things in that proposal, I think, need to be questioned outside of the size before you vote on the proposal as a whole. Thanks.
And Micah, let me just jump in and clarify real quick. I was not saying let's take a vote right now. I was saying, can we just get a pulse on the doggone room?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and we're gonna go through here. My question to everyone is tell us what counts as a square, rectangle, and a panhandle. So make sure I understand what counts. So go ahead, Paul, if you like.
Yeah, I was thinking that David's was good, but I did want to point out, I think Micah mentioned it, the cooktop. I think earlier we had talked about maybe a microwave would be okay as a cooking appliance rather than some of those some of that other stuff but I think we need to keep kind of all the minimum things that are described in the efficiency dwelling unit or dwelling unit, whatever we're calling it, because there's the separate bathroom that's in there, and then it specifically gives you parameters that honestly you could not get a space with all of these things in a 70 square feet. It'd be a lot bigger than that if you have all the minimum components that are required. So when you get to the 70 square feet, you have to get really creative in order to fit all of the requirements of what would be for a dwelling unit. So, but I think 120, we've had that on the books for quite a while, just from the history of looking back at the code. So I wouldn't see any reason to change it lower than the 120.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Okay, go ahead, Michael.
For the legislation, it's like all we need to do is strike 1208.3. Realistically, we don't have to touch anything else because that still leaves the 120 minimum room and so forth. We may want to touch it to try to clarify it, but as far as the legislation is concerned, all we really need to do is remove that 1208.3 so that there is no base minimum, and then let the 120 room size and the 70 square foot room size and so forth, and the market dictate everything else. That's that's my opinion. So I think everything beyond that is sure, we need to come up with it, but our current state language is pretty good in that effect, where with the minimum room areas and the way it's worded, and including the separate sentence for sleeping units. So if we were going to look at a short fix, I would say 1208.3 needs to be struck. Everything else then is what's really subject to further discussion if we wanted to go there.
Okay. Tim?
So this gets into those drawings that were up before. So if we strike 1208.3 altogether, this was my concern, is we're talking about this neck. If you look at the first one on here that says congregate, there is the area that's open to the bedroom area, if you will, and living area. It's all in one. That creates a hallway from the corridor over to it, and also has a little cooktop and sink there. That's the neck when we're talking about the neck. And then the box that David mentioned is the square bedroom area. So in Micah's proposal, and what was just discussed, I think Michael brought it up, was Micah's proposal, but Micah brought it up, was that we just strike 1208.3 and let the room area dimensions kind of govern things. But he has a habitable one room of 120 square feet. So that would force the box area alone to be at least 120 square feet. And that's what I'm saying is, if we're comfortable going down to 70 square feet for one room, then why? So why not adjust the 1208.3 to be the overall, which would include that neck, because it wouldn't include the bathroom and it wouldn't include the closet, but it would include the neck. We'll get you real close to that 120, and then we're back to aligning closer to what the residential code kind of just went down to. So there's a big part of me that wants to see the structure of the two separate sections and still have it at 120 overall of habitable floor area, and then at least 70 square feet for the box area.
You want both. You still want the 120 okay.
Because otherwise they could take that kitchen area, slide it over, and then maybe have the entrance to the bathroom on the other side, and you lose that neck area if you don't have that 120 square feet in there. We assume there's always going to be a neck like this because this is the way they're typically done. But could you start designing it without a neck? And I don't know how that would look right now. Maybe the bathrooms are stacked and overlap each other on the opposing side or something to that effect. You never know. You can get creative with design. So I'd like to still see an overall minimum of the habitable floor area being more than 70, because that's just for your bedroom dimension. So there has to be a number higher than 70. I wouldn't be opposed to it being closer to 150, but I think 120 kind of synchronizes things. So yeah.
Okay. All right, 7 minutes. David.
Thanks. I just wanted to clarify. I mean, the drawings that are up are really helpful for this. So the two rectangles that I'm drawing, I mean, this is a pretty good example of the difference between 70 and 120, right? Like that's about right. And where on the upper left where it says congregate, that's about a 70 square foot living room, and then the rest of it. And down below, that's about 120 square foot living room. It looks about right. The only, and my point being, it's like the same human that's living in both of them. They're not different. And Micah, to your point of what's outside of the room, I mean, very few of these buildings have significant generous commons. They usually have just a nominal kitchen that's there to meet code, and it's not a significant amenity that adds to the livability. I mean, some projects do. We build nice ones, but it's not the norm. So the only difference, if my proposal were adopted, you would be able to put a cooktop here, and then it would be a dwelling unit because the kitchen would be a complete kitchen, and it would, and I just can't see a justification for having wildly divergent rules for sleeping rooms and dwelling units that are sleeping units and dwelling units that are meant to serve the same part of the housing market and serve the same human biological humanistic needs. So, and to the point of like 120 has been on the books, but 70 hasn't. They've both been on the books for a long time, and we've built to housing that's based on 70 square foot living room, and we built housing that's based on 120. They both exist, and there's thousands of units, that are out there functioning in the marketplace and desired and useful for people.
Am I correct in remembering that at a previous meeting, someone made the comment that historically that additional area for a cooktop was there because of the ventilation and the exhaust for a natural gas, which maybe the technology has changed enough that doesn't matter, or am I making that up? To support your argument, David, that it doesn't
Yeah,
matter. Or boiling water or whatever it is.
It's my understanding that these numbers are completely arbitrary, and they're just numbers that have been yanked out of the air over the years, and that they're not supportable by empirical explanation.
Okay, thank you. Micah?
Lots going on here, and I know you may want to try to vote. I'm not sure you're going to get there.
No, it's okay. I mean, I'm trying to keep us moving, but
yeah, I
don't
don't
think
think we can get to a conclusion on some of these things. I get the size. I do like Mike Barth's recommendation of just striking the 190 and then possibly striking the efficiency dwelling unit. Again, if we go smaller than the 120, I think you're going to run into other unintended consequences. I actually think, and I was trying to research that really fast, but I believe that you would then allow spaces or dwelling units that are smaller in the building code than you would in the residential code. Because I believe the residential code requires a separate kitchen outside the 70 square feet, which if you go to straight 70 square feet here, you would not require that. So again, then we're going to be out of alignment and having issues. I like Tim's proposal.
Congregate sleeping rooms are usually smaller than houses. I mean, it's like that's not that weird.
I know, I get that. I think you also we need to separate congregate sleeping areas and sleeping units as compared to dwelling units. These are two different things. And if we don't want those to be two different things, that's an entirely separate code change proposal that is outside the legislation. The legislation is strictly about dwelling units, not sleeping units. So I appreciate Mr. Neiman's proposal on this, that if they're relatively the same, propose code changes that can be vetted transparently in relation to that outside the legislation, because that's not what the legislation does or drives here. I think we need to be careful. The other thing that was stated by Mr. Neiman is that a cooktop suffices for the cooking facility for everyone. It does not. It is not a permanent fixture. And there's a lot of jurisdictions, and I want to say the code states the same thing, it needs to be permanent. If you have a plug-in type cooktop, that's not permanent. So if you're just throwing it up there, that therefore would not create a kitchen right out of the gate. That's one interpretation, but that's not everyone's interpretation. That's not consistent. So
I agree with you,
where he's
Mike.
trying to go with this, and I appreciate it. I think that we could get to that floor design or floor plate that he has shown here for the congregate living size. And I think we can get down to the, again, Mike Barth's recommendation of just striking the 190, keeping the 120 and the other 70 for other habitable spaces. I think it would be a good balance. But if again, I'll just say it, if we're talking sleeping units and dwelling units, those are two different things, and sleeping units are not part of the legislation. Thanks.
Okay. I think I'm hearing different things, but okay, go ahead, Joe. And then we've got 1 minute left, so go ahead and then let's decide who's gonna champion writing this down.
Yeah, with 1 minute, not enough time. I was interested in going back to the discussion on net versus gross, and here if the egress path in front of the kitchenette wouldn't, I don't think, count toward net. And so if you have a 70 square foot overall net area, I mean, your unit with the neck, if you included that, is still going to be larger than 70 square feet. I don't know if that gets it more in line with what Micah was just talking about in terms of discrepancies between the residential code and the building code. And I don't know. I guess it's not, that was one point that wasn't super clear to me. So
Well, maybe what we'll do is Dustin and I, maybe we'll reach out and bounce language back and forth to a few of you and try to converge a little bit. And then let's get this on the agenda next time. We're going to focus on back on emergency shelters. Yeah. But let's just get this on the agenda so it's there and we can talk about it if we got language ready.
Okay.
Okay. I think we made progress, but we'll try to wrap this up. But I think we're all have desire to talk about it, so that's good.
Hey, David, I'll reach out to you. I do have a question on if you're open to getting rid of the efficiency dwelling unit and not adding the modified language.
Sure.
Cross-pollinate as much as
Yeah,
we can.
by all means. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
All right. Thanks,
Okay.
Micah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. We're adjourned.
Thank you.